Elijah McClain died after a police stop and ketamine injection in August of 2019. Well, today, 4 years later, two Aurora police officers walked into court to stand trial for their part in the 23-year-old black man's death. Opening statements in the trial began this afternoon. Good evening, I'm Karen Lee.
And I'm Kelly White in for Michael Spencer. Now, McClain was stopped by Aurora police officers late at night as he walked home. Now, someone called 911 to report him as a suspicious person. The 23-year-old was walking with groceries and wearing a ski mask. He was not armed. Aurora police claimed McClain was, quote, uncooperative. Then a struggle with three officers ensued, and paramedics injected him with ketamine. McClain went into cardiac arrest. He was declared brain dead and pulled off life support days later. McClain's death became a rallying cry during protests in Denver and around the country. They pushed for racial justice and condemned police brutality. These protests helped catalyze a grand jury investigation into McClain's death, an amended autopsy that was released 3 years afterwards. It stated McClain died of, quote, complications of ketamine administration following forcible restraint. In September of 2021, police officers and paramedics involved in his death were indicted.
Former Aurora police officer Jason Rosenblatt and Randy Rodema are the first of 5 first responders to go on trial. Karen Morfitt has been at the Adams County Courthouse all day long, sitting in today. So, Karen, what is the latest?
Well, Karen, the courtroom empty now with those opening statements ending a little over an hour ago. Both the prosecution and defense for both of those defendants had a chance to lay out what they plan to present as evidence during this trial. It took about 2 hours for both sides to get through their arguments. Randy Rodema and Jason Rosenblatt were surrounded by their attorneys as they entered the courtroom. Elijah McClain's mother arriving shortly after. 14 jurors were seated, and just before those opening statements began, she wiped tears from her eyes as the prosecution played body camera video showing the police encounter with her son. The prosecution says they plan to show that the department policy and procedures, specifically those designed to de-escalate a situation, were not followed by these officers and ultimately led to McClain's death. Attorneys for Rodema and Rosenblatt, however, argue they did follow policy and pointed guilt at the third officer not currently on trial, as well as those paramedics who injected McClain with ketamine.
Please listen to Elijah's words. He says, I'm an introvert. Please respect my boundaries. I'm just going home. There will be later on the tape some statements by the police officers that Elijah didn't make any sense. He was acting crazy when they drove up upon him. Judge for yourself. Was the issue here that Elijah wasn't making sense, or was the issue that no one was listening to?
I mean, these are statements and conversations he was having with the officers after he was handcuffed in a recovery position for approximately 3 minutes. And what does that mean? That means Elijah McClain was alive. Now, all of that changed when the paramedics came on scene. Now, when officers contact Aurora Fire and Medical and they come on scene, that's when police involvement ends. There's basically a division. Police involvement up to a point, but then when paramedics arrive on scene, the paramedics have full medical control.
And I understand that sympathy is tremendous here. I get that. But the law requires you to move that out of this equation. That's not fair.
Now, Rodema, during the playing of that body camera, I was watching him in the courtroom. He looked visually uncomfortable when that body camera video of that encounter was playing. Rosenblatt, I was also watching. He stayed stoic and was very intently listening to the statements that were being given by both sides. The jury does return tomorrow morning, and we'll hear from the first witness to take the stand. Back to you.
Karen, we know jury selection was delayed for hours today. Did you ever learn why?
Karen, we did. We were able to get back into the courtroom just after lunch to learn what was delaying those opening statements. From what we heard from the judge, there were issues about some of the dismissals, the juror dismissals that happened earlier in the morning being based on race. Ultimately, the judge did decide and ruled that none of the dismissals, none of the jurors who were let go based on race. He said all of those were race-neutral decisions. Karen.
All right. Karen Morfitt, thank you for your live coverage today for us. We appreciate it.
Well, Elijah's death and these court cases have already spurred reform in Colorado.
Yeah, and for the better. The death of Elijah McClain led to many new laws in Colorado. In 2021, Colorado passed a new law that puts limits on the use of ketamine, and it requires responders to learn or to estimate a person's weight before they give ketamine. In 2020, Colorado also passed a sweeping police reform bill that bans chokeholds. McClain was placed in a chokehold before he died. It also required all local and state police officers to wear body cameras and that all body camera footage must be made public. Police can turn off their body cameras in certain cases, like when they are undercover. This new law also says police should apply nonviolent means when possible before resorting to the use of physical force. The mother of Elijah, Shanine McClain, was also invited to the White House last year for President Biden's signing of an executive order on police reform.